For decades, credit unions had a 4 to 6% share of the financial services market. Since 2008, that share has grown to 10%. That's not a huge number, but when you start looking at the power of financial services industry and what that represents, it's a pretty large number. So, and that just goes to the sustainability of cooperatives again. In terms of governance, I'm going to talk a little bit about the what. And it all starts with the vision and mission. And the chair and the board must agree on the vision and the mission. From there, the board structure enables accomplishments of the vision and mission, and the CEO must have latitude to empower support functions to accomplish the vision and mission. Governance places the board clearly in control of the organization, but at a very broad level. Through clear and proactive delegation of expectations and authority to the CEO, it simultaneously fulfills the board's fiduciary role and empowers the CEO to flexibly and creatively perform what the board has defined. The board's job is to be accountable to its moral ownership, and the board explicitly designs its own products and processes. The board speaks with one voice, and we're all familiar with board meetings where there's the meeting and there's the meeting outside of the meeting. But this really goes to the selection of your board members and the nominating committees. The board formulates policy by determining the broadest values before progressing to more narrow ones, and the board decisions are primary policy decisions. In terms of responsibilities, the board represents the cooperative members. The board establishes the policies. It is responsible for acquisition and preservation of the cooperative assets. It preserves the cooperative character of the organization, ensuring that that organization remains a cooperative. The board assesses the cooperative's performance, and the board informs the member, which is a little bit different from other boards, as it has a direct link to the membership. Also with the boards in cooperatives is the duty of obedience. And that's the performance of roles. The duty of care is the duty of diligence, and that's defined as acting in good faith, being prudent, and using good judgment. And there's duty of loyalty, which refers to conflict of interest. In terms of the board-CEO relationship, the board defines and delegates rather than reacts and ratifies. Its best control over staff is to limit and not prescribe. So the board really stays within the context of strategy and not so much on the tactical affairs of what management is doing. The board must form a linkage with management that is both empowering and safe, and the performance of the CEO must be monitored rigorously solely against policy criteria. I would also urge you, when you're building your governance model, to implement a CSR governance guideline, or guidelines rather. That's corporate social responsibility. In our case, we refer to it as cooperative social responsibility. But effective management of social and environmental risks can improve the business performance, and that's been borne out in a number of studies.
Back when I started my career doing political organizing, this is the kind of room we dreamed of. Small, hot, crowded, standing in the rafters. You knew you were off to a successful event if you had a room of this type. So thanks everyone for your indulgence with that, and thanks in particular to our partners here, John and Richard and Jan at Nashco, for working with NCBA on organizing this event. It's been a great partnership, and we look forward to many years of future success with that. A lot of people have been mentioning a lot of different things that I concur with. One thing that I'd like to do is interject some interactivity to this event. And if everyone would take their pen, please, and with a piece of paper, and please write down the name of a tree. Okay. Look up when you're done. Shouldn't be that long. Okay, need a few volunteers now. Just please say what kind of tree. John? Ponderosa pine. Jim? Acorn. Oak. Elm. Hickory. Sugar maple. Cottonwood. Palm. Cypress. Okay. No, great. Thank you very much. You all passed. Correct. You all named trees. And in a way, that's very true with co-ops. All right. There's lots of different types of co-ops that are all called co-ops. So we can be a lot of different things. And it's the reason why the business model has been so successful for such a long period of time. There are co-ops that serve the agricultural community, household names like Sunkist and Land O'Lakes that have been around for almost 100 years, Cabot Cheese, Organic Valley, newer one. There are co-ops that serve worker-owned businesses like Equal Exchange and Isthmus Engineering and Union Cab. There are co-ops that serve small businesses, purchasing co-ops. I would imagine a good deal of you might be surprised to learn that every franchise owner of Kentucky Fried Chicken is a member of a co-op, a Unified Food Service. They do not buy their chickens from KFC. They buy them from each other because they realize the co-op business model works for them. And that's 1 million chickens a day. So it's a pretty serious business. They go in scale from less than $1 million in revenue to over $60 billion in revenue. CHS, Senex Harvest States, headquartered in Minnesota, would be a Fortune 100 company if they were publicly traded. But they're not publicly traded, and that, in essence, is the co-op difference. But what we're met here with this legislation, though, is the challenge of how we take this acronym of co-op and try in our best way to make it a cooperative in the truest sense of the form. And I certainly recognize the difficulties that the legislation presented to us. NCBA has testified several times before the advisory committee. Very pleased with the advisory committee's report that was sent up to the secretary, and we say a great word of thanks to our friends at HHS and Barbara Smith and the whole team for their willingness to work with us. It's been a great relationship there as well. So how do we take what's best of a co-op and apply it to what will be a 501c29 tax-exempt organization? And the answer is in the co-op governance. Because even though these entities will operate on a nonprofit basis, they can have the co-op governance model that my colleagues here have described. The real issue becomes at the end of the day with an equity stake. But there are a large number of cooperatives that really never get to the point where they're doing a patronage rebate of return of equity back to their members. Many credit unions do not have that patronage capital dividend. They return the benefit to their members through lower cost rates on loans or higher rates on savings. So the model can work. It can, if you think of it in the old days of an overhead projector where you put one layer on top of the other. We can have a cooperative governance model firmly in place, even given the restrictions of this legislation. The marketing restriction is one that certainly will be a challenge. We urged HHS, and I urge all of you to refer to your materials as educational materials. Because that's what you're doing. You're going to be educating people about the cooperative business model, and that's what the communications subcommittee hopes to do, come up with different educational materials that we can explain what these entities will be. We've heard a number of very, very good comments. Mr. Weber said that this is not going to be an easy task, and that is absolutely correct. It will not be. Althea said from New York about the effort about being a socially responsible corporation. It's built into their DNA. And that's what co-ops do. We really think of ourselves as the original socially responsible organization because we operate not just for the economic purpose, but for the social purpose. And when you don't have the outside investors who are forcing your hand on wanting to make a profit for the business, it allows you to focus on your members and your owners. The way I like to align it is that we're all in the rowboat rowing in the same direction. We all have the same interests at heart. So how do we get to the point where these entities can get off the ground and running in a very good way early on? It starts with the design right from the beginning. We also heard about the different culture that exists. Anne-Marie from Group Health said that they have about 40,000 voting members. Well, if you create a culture right from the onset that you want your members to be actively engaged voting members, well, then that's a culture that you can help create. Again, you're going to have some leeway into what you want to do. We find that the most successful cooperatives do have actively engaged members. And if you build that culture right from the start, and that goes into the design phase of how you're doing this. The board members. There are 29,000 co-ops currently in existence in the United States. There are over 330 million co-op memberships in this country. And some of you are wondering, how could that be? There's only about 310 million people. That's because there's folks like me who are members of 4 co-ops. So we estimate that at least 130 million Americans are members of one co-op or another. So there is a great awareness. I say awareness. I will not say full understanding of the co-op business model. Because if you can probably tell, I grew up in the South, South Brooklyn, and the rural part. And if you said co-op to me growing up, it meant housing. It was just absolutely synonymous with housing. You grow up in John's part of the country, I'm sure when you say co-op, you're thinking about the electric co-op or the Grange or one of the ag co-ops. So it means different things to different people. And one of the things that we have to do is crack through that this model works. And it works with great consumer satisfaction when they know that they can control the business that delivers such an important service to them, their health care. At the end of the day, my grandmother said, if you have your health, you have everything. So when we're talking about such a core service as this, if we have the ability to have consumer control over it and dictate the direction that the business that's going to provide their health care coverage going to be, I think we will have great acceptance.